Hey, Browns fans, Spencer German, Anthony Moeglin alongside with you. Obviously, me downtown here at Huntington Bank Field, Anthony back home, as we react with you in real time to the game we saw today. Browns fall to the Bengals 21-14. But as you guys are well aware at this point, there was a lot of other storylines that came out of this game unrelated to, I mean, I guess not totally unrelated to what happened on the field today, but unrelated to the fact that the Browns are now 1-6, looked terrible on offense yet again. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't start with the fact that, yeah, Deshaun Watson leaves this game on a cart. Looks like, I mean, based on the replay, it's all the telltale signs that he ruptured his Achilles, which means, as Kevin Stefanski, I believe, confirmed after the game, it's most likely season ending for him. And so here we are, a little less than 12 months after a season-ending shoulder injury for Deshaun, talking about another season-ending injury for the Browns starting quarterback. And there's a lot of tentacles off of this thing that we're going to try to sort of dissect with you, on top of the fact that the crowd reaction was definitely interesting and something that sparked a lot of controversy with the players post-game. But, Megs, I'll go to you first just on the overall, your overall thoughts on just Deshaun getting hurt, what was kind of happening before the injury, and, your kind of read on the situation as the Browns fall to 1-6 on the season.
Yeah, it feels like football is like so not like it feels like that game didn't even happen. Like as we sit here right now, it feels like this is a off-season.
It was kind of a numbing moment. That's a good way to put it.
It's like you're standing there on the field and like the water's going behind you. And I'm like, what? Like, did we play a game today? Like, there were so many other things that happened. And a couple initial thoughts. First was, it definitely, the fan reaction definitely affected the team. Like they obviously, one, they heard it. And two, it pissed them all off. Like, you go check out every interview that Spence, you did in the locker room, and that was a part of the podium. It's available on our YouTube channel here, Cleveland Browns on SI. Every player made a comment on it about how Greg Newsome had some choice words, which we'll get to in a little bit. Myles Garrett opened his press conference with basically a statement of how bad it was and then
there was David Njoku, who apparently didn't hear it, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and then
everybody else heard it. He didn't, I guess. I don't know.
But it was like it was interesting to kind of feel, because there's certainly a massive disconnect between what the fans feel with the whole Deshaun Watson situation, with everything that's involved in it, because maybe the guys do a good job of like putting this bubble around them and they don't hear the outside noise, but like we live in the outside noise. We are part of the outside noise.
And the outside noise on game day, it's impossible not to, again, unless you're David Njoku, but it's impossible not to hear it. Like the weirdest, not the weirdest, but the most interesting or ironic thing about game day, the game day experience, is that for the weeks and the months and the days where these players say, we don't pay attention to the outside noise comes inside on those days. Like, we're inside the stadium right now. The outside noise is in your house. Like, you hear that. And that's kind of, to your point, like, that does feel like what played out in that moment, where the fan reaction was, again, number of people, as there's a spider on my phone, a number of people booing Deshaun as he, it was kind of a mix of like booing him because they don't like him and he's hurt, but also cheering for the fact that he is hurt. I kind of picked up on when he was carted off, there was kind of like the courtesy, you cheer for the fact that the guy is okay and he's being taken off on the cart. That was like the thing I picked up on. And then I kind of went back and listened to it and realized what the reaction was when he initially got hurt, because I think we were all kind of soaking it in real time, like what the hell just happened. But yeah, like it's impossible to block that out on game day, because the outside noise comes inside, and that's what played out in front of us, I think, today.
And Spence, I want to hear your perspective on it, because you were there. Obviously, I wasn't. Was it evident to the fan, or maybe to you, because you have TVs next to you? Like, watching on TV, I knew immediately he tore his Achilles. Like, you knew the second it happened. Do you think the fans potentially thought maybe just rolled his ankle or something, maybe didn't think it was as serious, or did you know, hey, this is bad right away?
In real time, it felt like the stadium and all of us in the press box knew pretty quickly it was something serious, mostly because of how Deshaun reacted. Like, before we even saw the replay, it wasn't like he just twisted an ankle and like he was like getting up slow and trying to kind of hobble off the field. He had his head in his hands. He was on the ground, grabbing at his leg, and it was like he's not getting up. So we kind of knew immediately. And then people started throwing out like, is he grabbing his knee? Is he grabbing his ankle? I think it was an Achilles. And then we saw the replay, which they don't play the replay of that stuff in the stadium, as you know, but they played it in the press box, and we all were like, yeah. Given what I mean, it looked like Aaron Rodgers last year. Like it was the exact same thing. Plants his foot, and you just see the calf muscle like just basically release, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's probably an Achilles. And so yeah, and then after that, we kind of knew what was happening from there. I do want to play. We have a couple clips here for you guys. Miles, as Anthony mentioned, opened up his press conference because I do want to continue this conversation. But I think the context of what the players are saying in the locker room afterwards is important. So this was what Miles said to open his press conference. And then we got one other clip from you from Greg Newsome to play as well. We'll start with Miles.
No, with the extent what the card comes out, we should be ashamed of ourselves. As Browns and as fans to boo anyone and their downfall could be season-altering, career-altering injury. Man, it's not perfect. He doesn't need to be. None of us are expected to be perfect. Can't judge him for what he does, off the field or on the field, because I can't throw stones from my glass house. But we need to do better. We need to do better on the football field, and we need to do better as fans for having some empathy for a man who's doing the best he can and did the best he can up to this point. We have to be better.
So I think, again, and this is the locker room. So the responses are going to be, very much in favor of Deshaun. That's his teammate. They're going to defend him. I do think that some of what Garrett says, like the message is there, but I do think like you lose some of the fans with some of this commentary as well, and I'll explain why. But I do want to play first. We'll play the Newsome clip as well, and then we'll react to both. And I'll sort of give you the rundown on what Jameis said because I did watch the clip of what he said, even though I wasn't in his scrum. So here's what Greg Newsome said. A little bit more, maybe Miles was a little more eloquent with it. Greg was a little more direct.
Oh yeah, no, that was bullshit. Yeah, I noticed it right away. I mean, no matter what you feel about a player, performance wise or not, you don't boo a guy that's down, that can't get up by himself. So yeah, that was bullshit. So any fan that said anything is bullshit. That's simple. You don't do that. Like I said, whether the guy's playing well or not, whether you're a fan favorite, whether you're anything, you don't boo a guy that's sitting down. So yeah, that's bullshit.
Like I said, a little more direct. I saw somebody, I put that video out on Twitter and somebody tweeted, I didn't know they taught those words at Northwestern, which I thought was pretty funny tweet. In lieu of everything, that one made me laugh a little bit. But no, like here's the thing. I think what Greg said is spot on. And I think like that's what the message should be. The message should be, and I'm making this clear to all the fans out there, even some that might feel inclined to have booed him if they would have been here, or maybe you were here and you booed him or cheered for him, whichever it was. But I've never been in the business, and I don't think anybody should be in the business of booing a player or cheering for a player who got hurt, whether it's an opposing player on a team that you hate or your own player. And so yeah, like I thought that was a pretty scummy thing to do from a fan base, from a fan perspective, because you just don't do that. I understand that the history that's there, how Deshaun Watson's certainly been part of a number of controversies at this point, and a lot of that's on he did it to himself. But in that moment, in that instance, I don't think it's the appropriate time to react that way. Now, what I think is interesting is like, and again, you got to remember where it's coming from. This is the locker room. This is the players. But I think where the players lose the fans a little bit is when they go from saying what Greg said, which is you just don't do that, and be very, very clear. Like, that's dumb. You don't do it. It's the wrong thing to do. It's the wrong reaction. And then when you start tying it into like, well, you need to have empathy for him, and you need to, like, he's tried to do everything the right way. I think that's where you lose fans, given what we know Deshaun Watson's history is. And that doesn't mean, again, this is not me excusing the behavior, and this is not me saying that it was the right thing for anybody who was in this building behind me to do today. I just think, like, I know that they have to say that. They have to deliver that message for their own teammate. But I think, like, that's where fans might hear Greg Newsome say that's BS and be like, you know what, he's right. I don't know that fans are watching Myles Garrett's response, and even some of what Jameis Winston said. I know I'm getting long-winded here. I apologize, Megs. I'm going to give you the floor here in a second. But like Jameis Winston gave like a whole sermon about it and everything that he's been through. I clearly, because of the reaction today, this fan base doesn't want to hear the Deshaun is a victim card. Like as much as I understand in this moment where it might make sense for the locker room and the guys to say that, I don't think they want to hear that right now. Given everything that surrounded him since he got here to Cleveland.
Yeah, and I think that, this is hard because I don't want to say the wrong thing. And it's like, yes, I totally agree that what Greg said is totally right. You never cheer whether you like the person or not. But here's what those 60,000 people that were in those orange seats behind you here on Monday every week for the past 2 months is that Deshaun Watson's a horrible person. All of the bad things about him, and he's bad at quarterback. We hear that every single day, every show, whether it's you tune into 92.3 The Fan, whether you tune into Pardon My Take, whether it's Dan Patrick Show, whatever it is, it's the number one story, and it's just battered on our heads every single week about how like awful this situation is, and like the fans are fed up. This team was supposed to be. We talked about it on the last preseason game. You asked me what's the expectation for this team, and we both were like, AFC Championship game. That's what the expectation was. That was when you had Amari Cooper. That was when, Nick Chubb was supposed to come back. Jedrick Wills was supposed to come back. Jack Conklin. All these guys were supposed to come back. And then this season's just been a total disaster, top to bottom. You're 1-6. And now this happens. And it's like, oh my gosh. Like, and the irony, the total irony of all of this is he was playing good. He was playing well in the first half. Like, he was 15 to 17 for 128 yards, and we were in the red area. He was
the drive he was on, he got into the red zone. Yeah,
he was outplaying Joe Burrow at the time, and it's like, okay, like you don't know. We've done this. We've played this song and dance before, right? Like, is he getting better? Is he getting worse? Very inconsistent, obviously, but we finally get you hold on to, hey, he's starting to play even a little bit. He's starting to play okay, and then his Achilles pops off, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're like, it just insult to injury, salt on the wound, and I think two things can be true. Fans are fed up, but also fans were wrong today to do and cheer the way they did.
And I think that's well said by you, because I do think the reaction was, weeks, maybe even 3 years now of frustrations built up around this player and everything that he came to town with, and the play on the field not being up to par of what was expected. And I can understand why fans feel that way. I'm saying I understand the fan perspective where it's like you don't want to hear them turn Deshaun Watson into a victim given everything that's gone on off the field. I get that. But in this moment, I guess the answer is you just don't react in any way. You don't boo, you don't cheer, you don't do anything. You just give him the courtesy. He's on the cart, but he's okay, and he's taken off the field, and you give him the applause for that, and you keep it moving, and maybe you save your cheering for when Nick Chubb scores a touchdown, and that's the thing that you kind of directed to. That's probably how it should have gone down. So yeah, like I can't side with the fans for doing it, that the ones that at least did do it. It was wrong, but I also, I understand where you don't want to be lectured about like what how to handle or how to feel about a player that you maybe don't like. So it's kind of it's a very, very tough situation. There's a lot of gray area in there, but I think the message overall here is that shouldn't have happened. He shouldn't have been getting cheered as he's down on the turf and then taken off on the card. Now the next level of this, Anthony, is like, what does it mean for Deshaun Watson's future and the future of the Cleveland Browns as the trade deadline approaches, and they're now 1-6 on the season. And I think that conversation can maybe be saved for a little bit later in this conversation. But as far as like Deshaun's future, I mean, I'm just going to be honest right now, with 15 minutes into this conversation, I think he's probably played his last snap for the Browns. I mean, and maybe that's hyperbolic of me to say. Maybe, people are going to be like, you're crazy. How are they getting out from this contract? I don't even think it's about getting out from underneath the contract. I just think it's like, I mean, if his own teammates heard that, you don't think he heard that? You think that the guy who's getting carted to the locker room, who now knows like he has like next to no support in the city and nobody has his back except the team. Like, do you think that guy wants to come play in front of in this stadium again? And so I think from like a mental standpoint, like this is going to test Deshaun, not only because he's injured again, he's got to go through another injury, but it's going to test Deshaun from like his mental fortitude to come back from another injury, another serious injury at that, and still try to be the same player. But it's also going to test him in terms of like, can he really continue to play under so much scrutiny from a fan base that clearly doesn't have his back? And again, I'm not saying that you guys aren't wrong to not have his back. You can feel however you want to feel about Deshaun Watson. You shouldn't have booed him, but you can feel however you want to feel about Deshaun Watson. I just think like there's no coming back from this in terms of getting him back out there in the field. I think the organization now has like, I don't want to say an easy out, but they have a card that they can play where they just say, instead of admitting that they got this wrong, they can just say, well, injuries, kind of cost him this part of his career, and we got to start thinking about the future. So if we're going to just stink this year, we'll go draft a rookie quarterback and make that the next phase of this. And they now have like a legitimate reason to do it without just being like, well, we got this wrong and Deshaun stinks. So yeah, like I think like this is the turning point in terms of Deshaun's future here with the Cleveland Browns. And whether he's here because you have to pay out the contract or not, and you can't move it, and he's just not playing and he's not really part of the roster like he was in Houston that last year. Maybe that's what I don't know. I don't know what all that looks like, but I don't think he's playing another down for this team. I truly mean that.
So in a conversation I was having with a buddy of mine, we were just talking about our whole situation, right? Just like everything that's been going on, not necessarily today, but it was like last week or something. He goes, you, if you're Deshaun Watson, you also can't be enjoying all this stuff. He can say to you and to the media that he blocks it all out and he doesn't hear.
He doesn't. None of these guys do.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like, at what point are you like, as him, you're like, I hate being the headline of every show. And like, is this an opportunity for him to just like fall away into the black? Like, you know what I mean? He's not going to, but like, is an opportunity for him to just kind of fade away and like, hey, whatever this last 3 years were is what they were. He can rehab, maybe try to come back, maybe not. But dude, for 3 years, we've been having this rust conversation about him, like knocking off the rust. He's staring at a 12-month recovery right now. And that is 6 months of that, 5 months of that's immobile, where he can't even move. And, it is just,
unless he talks to Aaron Rodgers' shaman, who helped him, I guess, come back in 6 months or whatever the hell it was.
True. Maybe he'll be back for the Super Bowl for us.
Which never was actually going to happen, by the way. But I just, trying to provide some levity to the conversation to make it funny. But yeah.
It is, dude. It is, from bad to worse. This year goes from worst to whatever's after worst, because
worst to worse,
or whatever it may be. It's it just stinks, man. Because like I said, the worst part is he was playing well today, and like, you're in the football game. We haven't even talked about the game. Let's say they don't take the opening kickoff back for a touchdown. Well, it's not a good offensive half, but you're up 6-0 or 7-0 potentially. He was playing okay, and it's like, all right, you're gonna have a chance to win today, but I don't know. At this point, I guess we could. Yeah, it's just bad to worse, and a very unfortunate day, kind of for the Browns.
I think that's well said. And yeah, like I'm being serious. Like I do think that this is like the turning point of the Deshaun experience, where I just don't know how you come back from this. Like, the organization knows how toxic it is. They heard it today. To bring him back next year and be like, well, he's coming back from an Achilles. Like, to me, it seems like an easy card for them to play, just to be like, hey, injuries are going to sort of mess this up for us. We're not going to get to see the real potential of Deshaun Watson. We got to start thinking about moving forward and finding our next great quarterback, if we can find our next great quarterback. And so I guess if fans want to start having what quarterback are you drafting if the season ended today and you had the second pick or the first pick, whatever the hell it is at this point, I don't know. I don't even know. You can start doing that. So start getting to know start watching college football on Saturdays and get to know these quarterbacks, I guess. But I think that is kind of where my head's at with this. Like this, and that's why again, we haven't talked about the game, because we knew at some point like he could get benched and we'd feel similarly like that this was a big turning point. Now he gets hurt, and it's twofold, because it's like, not only did he get benched, and it's like you could maybe put him back out there and try again at some point or whatever, trade him. Or maybe not trade him, but like let him find a new place he wants to go and whatever, figure out the details. Now it's like, is he going to be the same player? It's the same conversation we were having with Nick Chubb the last year. So yeah, it's a pretty like the situation. It felt like over this game, like somewhat of a dark cloud that like, okay, we would be talking football. We would be talking about Nick Chubb's return, all these different things. And instead, I mean, maybe it's an ominous cloud is maybe the way to put it. I don't know. But this topic and this subject is now kind of lingering over this entire game and this entire season now, which it already was, but now it's like a different version of that. So yeah, I don't know if there's any way else to really put it, but it's certainly the headline from today.
Yeah, and I'd say if anybody or if nobody's been watching college football or college football at large, I would just say start tracking flights from Boulder, Colorado to Cleveland and Cleveland to Boulder, Colorado.
Well, we can get into why I don't think they should draft Shedeur Sanders, and it has nothing to do with his play on the field, but because I do think he's going to be a good player. But we'll save that for another conversation. No, so I think we need to at least touch on the fact that it was Nick Chubb's return today, and despite the fan base cheering when Deshaun got hurt, they also were cheering when he ran out of the tunnel for the first time since, in over a year, which was a really cool moment for him. And for the first time, when he scored a touchdown, found the end zone, which was a really, really cool moment to sort of cap off that drive that Deshaun had started. And this place went nuts when he scored. He scored once, it went nuts. They called it back as a penalty, scored again, and they went nuts again. And that's the other unfortunate thing with the Deshaun injuries. Like, it overshadows what was supposed to be a really, really cool moment for Nick Chubb in his return to the field, where we were supposed to kind of feel like, man, what a season that's been so bad had at least something that fans could get excited about. And we thought we'd be walking out of this one like celebrating, whether it was a win or a loss, the fact that, Nick Chubb made it back in Cleveland, had their dark night back and all these different things. And instead, it's overshadowed by this. But what were your overall thoughts on just the way Nick Chubb was received in his 2024 debut?
Yeah, so from the way he was received, it was all the content you could gather was all Nick Chubb. The Browns were posting him nonstop, saw the video, saw all the stuff. From an on-field perspective, it was a really tough kind of evaluation, if you will. Like, I think the Browns have a big problem on the offensive line, and not only that,
Jedrick Wills is pretty bad today.
Yeah, and not only that, their offense in general, especially when DTR was in, is like once he turned to hand the ball off, the whole defense was triggering. So it was like really challenging to run the football. He finished 11 carries, 22 yards, and that one touchdown. I thought it was awesome to get him in the end zone. I just, like probably everybody else listening to us right now, I'm a huge Nick Chubb fan. I love Nick Chubb. It was awesome to see him back out there. And I couldn't tell if he looked smooth. He looked smooth in warmups. He looked like he was running fine. He didn't really get the opportunity to break a bunch of tackles or to get out in the breakaway speed. So couldn't really tell from that perspective, but he took some good hits. He dropped that one on the first play of the game that I thought was going to be an interception post the kickoff return. I was like, oh, this is a disaster, but he settled in. I thought he looked all right. From your perspective, though, Spence, at the field, what was it like when he ran out of the tunnel? Because I envisioned that for 398 days, and like thought about what it would be like, and it looked electric. It awesome.
Was cool. I mean, there was also the fact that they, marketing 101, they put Deshaun right before him to kind of bury him in the lineup behind the guy that they knew was going to get the bigger reception. Sure. So that's another conversation in and of itself as well. But no, I mean, it was a cool moment. It was one that everybody's waiting for. I think the fact that, I don't know how well it came through on TV, but certainly here in the stadium, you could hear it. And when he scored, I think the loudest cheer was actually when he scored the touchdown. You know how the crowd is, like, sort of, it takes them a little bit to get in their seats. People still sort of filtering from the Muni lot in. So it wasn't like completely packed when Chubb ran out of the tunnel, but there was definitely more filled when he scored. And that was a good moment that I'm glad Browns fans did get to celebrate. And obviously nice to see him, cross the plane. I will say this again: the numbers aren't eye popping, and also I was trying to kind of track his snap count early on in the game, especially, and I want to say he got to about like 20 or so snaps in the first half, and then in the second half, I only counted I think like maybe 4 or 5 times that he was out there. He really did, and he only got 1 touch in the second half, so they definitely had him on a pitch count, which was expected. And I don't know that we saw like the Nick Chubb of old quite yet. There was a few runs where he got for like 6 or 7 yards, and it was like, okay, like that guy can still be in there. He's just got to get to that second level and kind of break it. And again, first game back, all those different things. But I will say, I thought that just his mere presence made, when Deshaun was still out there, he looked a lot more comfortable in like play action stuff because just because Chubb was out there. They were only averaging like 2.1 yards per carry. So it wasn't like they were like killing him with the run game. But just the fact that Chubb is a threat in the run game, I think kept the linebackers up close to the line of scrimmage and allowed some stuff to open up at the second level. And I thought that helped Deshaun get comfortable. So that was encouraging to see, no matter who's quarterback moving forward. Like we all wondered what the impact of Nick Chubb would be from like a morale standpoint with the team. I think you also saw it in the way that the game sort of played out because teams know they have to respect Nick Chubb.
Yeah. It was awesome to see. It was just great to have him back out there. And I think you brought up something really good there. It was like Deshaun did look much more comfortable than we've ever seen him, just sitting back in the pocket. And then there was that really cool.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off too, but there was the one play
yes, we were both
in deep in their own territory. It was, I forget what down it was, but Deshaun was under pressure, sort of rolled to it was like a vintage Deshaun Watson from Houston type play. And he rolled to his right and he would have gotten lit up, but Nick Chubb completely just like decleated a rusher. I forget who it was at the top of my head, and allowed him to kind of bust out a little bit further to the right. And then he threw a pass downfield. I want to say he hit Njoku for like 15 yards or something like that. It was a really good play. And it was like, that looked like vintage Deshaun. And it was fitting that the guy that they got back today, the guy that they talk about being the heart and soul of the team in Nick Chubb, was the guy who kind of freed him to be able to make that play sort of rolling out to his right.
Dude, that sequence was like the perfect microcosm of the season because it was one step forward, two steps back. Like Nick Chubb,
dude,
Nick Chubb dives, makes the block. Deshaun gets out in space, delivers one to Njoku. Njoku catches it, move in, let's go. Immediately, a false start, and then a sack right after. And you're like, all right, well, might as well just punt on second down.
Yeah, and I tried to keep track of the penalties. I have 9 penalties, I think, on here that got accepted. What? I don't know if you have the stats in front.
I had 8 for 80, so you're probably right. Oh, okay. No, we're both wrong. We're both wrong. 10 for 80.
Okay, so I must have missed one at the end because I was down getting ready for the post game stuff. But I tried to kind of track those and keep track of like which penalties they were. And it was a lot of pre-snap stuff today. It was guys not lining up right. Illegal shift, illegal formation. There was, it was illegal, ineligible man downfield on a play, which, that's whatever. Happens, I guess, from sometimes, especially on like screens. But yeah, I like the penalties continue to be a problem, but it was good to see Nick Chubb at least add something to this offense and at least be a threat for this offense. Did you have something else?
Yeah. So interesting there. Go and the clip you have of Joel Bitonio, I think it was like a minute and a half of him talking to the media. He, for the first time ever, said something negative. He was like, yeah, the refs were like odd today. He didn't directly call it out, but he was like, yeah, they didn't warn anybody on the offensive line. They gave Jed a alignment penalty. They normally warn the guys. The illegal man downfield was on him, and it was on a read. It was like a triple option play where they like read the end and then he can throw it or run it. It was with DTR, and DTR, it's like a second play. He like flipped it, kind of like an option flip. And they called it on Joel, and Joel was like, I was not. He said I was a yard downfield. So there was some interesting stuff. However, that stuff you can't blame it on the refs because it happens every single week. And the part that's so frustrating is all these like alignment problems happen and these pre-snap penalties that have nothing to do with playing football. If we had 10 holdings, fine, whatever. But these are all just like procedural type stuff. And this happens every Sunday. And then you look at the Wednesday and Thursday practice report, and there's 16, 17 guys who aren't practicing. And it's like, when they don't practice, it's not like they're out there listening or whatever. They're just not even out there on the field. Like the mistakes compound themselves week over week, and there's nothing happening during the week to fix them. It's a really frustrating cycle. Live TV, everybody. Live TV.
Hold on.
Sprinklers. That is all time.
Shout out to John Doss, News Channel 5, for the assist there. Appreciate you.
That's getting clipped for sure. Shout out, John.
Add that to the reel, right?
Yeah.
You know what? It's funny because there was the one down to my right that was going on, and I was like, "Is that one going to get close enough?" And I was like, "No, I'm good." And then all of a sudden, this one came by me, and I was like, "Oh no!" I almost dropped one of those words Greg Newsome used.
When it rains, it pours, right?
So no, I think that's a good point. I don't want to keep it too much longer. We've been going at it for a little while here, but I do think, I appreciate the laughs. Definitely laugh at my expense. I'm totally okay with that. I do think what's interesting, Anthony, again, given in lieu of everything, the Deshaun injury being the biggest thing, where this team is at with another loss, 1-6 on the season, like digging yourself out of this hole seems impossible. I know that you can almost always point to some team and be like, well, this team started this and, finished with a winning record and almost made the play. Like there's always something, but I think it's safe to say like this team's not going to be contending for the playoff spot at this point. Where do they go from here? And I think the biggest maybe answer to that is not even an answer, but I think the biggest part of that conversation is what awaits them in a couple weeks at the trade deadline. There's a bunch of guys who are on one-year contracts. We saw this morning overnight Adam Schefter sharing that it sounds like somebody like Zadarius Smith could be in consideration for a team like Detroit, who's looking for a pass rusher now that Aiden Hutchinson got hurt. So I'll give it to you here before we sign off. Where do you think they go from here in terms of what this roster looks like here in the weeks ahead?
Yeah, I am really uncomfortable with how it's all going to shake out because a lot of the guys on this team, like you really liked, and they've been here for a couple years, and they were supposed to be a part of the fix. They were supposed to be a part of getting this team back to prominence, and a lot of them are going to get shipped off. A lot of them are going to get shipped off. I don't know where the line is. I don't think that you deal a guy like Myles Garrett. I don't think that you deal a guy like Nick Chubb or anybody like that, even David Njoku. You try to keep the core together, but where do you draw the line? I guess is the question, and we're gonna find out here shortly. We got to get you off that field, dude.
Clearly. No, so I'll say this, and I've said this earlier in the week. I'll say it again. I don't think there is. As I'm about to get soaked here. It's fine. Whatever. I don't think there's any scenario where you trade Myles Garrett from this team. The reason being, I'm like losing my train of thought. The reason being, like teams go from worst to first all the time in this league, man. And like you need players like Myles Garrett. I think back to when John Gruden took over as the Raiders coach and they traded Khalil Mack. And then like the next year he was in a press conference like, yeah, good pass rushers are hard to find. It's like, not if you have them in your building. You had one and you traded them. And so I just like if you're trying to start from scratch in some way, shape, or form here, I know it's going to be hard to do with the Deshaun contract, but if you're trying to start from scratch, like you want somebody like Myles Garrett as a foundational piece on this team. So I kind of draw the line there. I think for the rest of this season, trading Nick Chubb would be silly because he is kind of like the feel-good story for you in a year that's obviously gone up in flames. But like, there's going to be some tough conversations that have to be had about what this roster looks like and who is part of the long-term plans of this team. And with the trade deadline now just a couple weeks away, November 5th here coming up, those conversations are just around the corner. So, all right, I think it's time to go before I get completely soaked. I toughed it out through as many sprinklers as I could at this point, guys. But we appreciate you, as always, jumping in on this conversation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you understand where we're coming from with the cheering for Deshaun thing. Not trying to call any fans out individually, but I think it's not the appropriate reaction, I think, for that moment. And I think the players kind of made that clear after the game as well. So, but again, we appreciate you guys. Follow along. We have all kinds of stuff going up at the website, Cleveland Browns on SI or si.com/NFL/Browns, as you kind of see on the little scroll at the bottom there. We'll have more coming up. I know I have some stuff I'm working on here post game as well. So we'll get that stuff up for you as soon as we can as well. But for all things Cleveland Browns, be sure to keep on tuning in over at Cleveland Browns on SI.